Omagyanatimirandasya Gyanandana Salakaya Chakshu Anmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Sachidananda Rupaye Krishna Aklishna Karane Namo Vedanta Vedaya Gurave Buddhi Sakshane. So over the last few weeks there's been a lot of talk about God and devotion to God and serving God. But who is this God fellow? And how do we know he's real? And a lot of people, when they hear this word God or they hear the term religion, they recoil in disgust. So we want to look at this today. So what are some of the reasons when we hear this term God or religion that we have an aversion to it? What do you think?
Religious trauma?
Yes, religious trauma, for sure.
Demoniac society.
The demoniac society?
Money.
Why would that make you recoil from God or religion?
Because it's like a big plan that they have to destroy your spirituality.
Right. The governing elite does not want you to know God.
What?
The governing elite does not want you to know God. Right. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think for me, if I say God, I have this idea that most people aren't interested in God, don't have that aversion, and then I feel like I'm already like being judged, or I have to justify and be able to explain who is this God, and it makes me feel uncomfortable. I'm not sure. But that's just me.
You feel like you have to justify your belief in God.
Yeah, and it's all, and you're already starting like this. Once you proclaim your faith, that you're already starting. There's like a division. Oh, you're this woo-woo guy who believes in this man in the sky, whatever, and straight away everything else that you say after that is going to be like respect lost, because you know your head's up in the clouds.
Yes, because you just sentimentally believe in Sky Daddy up in the clouds.
It's a very masculine word, like God. Like, it's not very friendly.
We want to address this today because it's a very good point. Any other thoughts?
Wars?
Wars?
Yeah, many wars are happening in the name of God.
So many millions and billions of people killed in the name of this God fellow, right?
Yeah.
Envy. We have envy of God. We want to be God, yeah? Why should God be God? Why can't I be God? Who made him God? Anything else?
Yeah, I feel that for me has a very different meaning, personally, of the meaning that I think that have for the outside of me, world. So I feel shy to talk about it because mostly I come from Western mentality and it's not very, common to talk about God and everything. So yeah, I keep it private, but it's not as bad as maybe years ago, the feeling, the word, the meaning behind the word.
Right. Yes, because it can be a very subjective thing. What God means to me may be very, very different to what the term God means to you. But if we have been raised in a Western society, generally there's been one predominant flavour of this God for the last couple thousand years. And knowingly or unknowingly, we're all heavily influenced by this particular flavour of God. And if you're in more of an Eastern country, there's another flavour of God that's very strong. So in terms of like a dictionary definition of, or a scholarly definition of the term God, there's not really any agreed upon consensus of what the term God means or religion. one definition of God is belief in a supernatural being. But in terms of religion, it's actually very hard for scholars to define what the word religion actually means. So we have this aversion to the word religion often because of very valid reasons, such as religious trauma and all the nonsense that continually goes on and has gone on in the name of religion. But actually, it can be quite difficult to define what is religion. But when you mention that word, we all have some sense of what we're pointing to, right? We're not talking about chocolate cake. We're talking about something quite specific. Because if we were to define religion as a certain belief system or following certain principles or practices on a regular basis, then we could see many things as religion. Like a lot of people, they wake up in the morning and the first thing they do is have a coffee religiously, and that's their practice, right? And they worship this coffee, and if they don't get their coffee, big problem coming. Or if you're a surfer, or so many different things, that's people's religion. They go out to nature, all kinds of things. Go to the pub every Friday night, that's their cathedral. So most people don't really define that thing as religion. So we really have some conception, it's in some kind of context on belief of some kind of higher power, and then the followers of that certain belief system. This is I would say probably most people would agree that there's some commonalities there. And yes, as I've already mentioned, God is a very subjective thing. But even this term God, because there's been a particular emphasis for the last couple thousand years from really the Abrahamic religions mostly around the world, then they have a very set view of this term God. And so because we have grown up, most of us in these Western influenced countries, our conception is shaded by that influence of God. Whether that is our personal conception or not, still those samskaras, those impressions will be in our consciousness. And it can be quite difficult to really free yourself from these particular conceptions of the divine. So a lot of people, because they've seen the horrors that have gone on in the name of God, then naturally they have an aversion to this term or religion in general. But if we actually look at all the wars around the world, such as the Crusades, the Spanish conquistadors coming to South America, all this kind of thing, supposedly to tame the natives and show them the true way, the true Lord. Actually, most of this is all an agenda for power and control and politics, and has nothing at all to do with God. And some people, they're using the pretext of God and religion to instigate their war, but it actually has nothing to do with their beliefs whatsoever. Because if we see, even in South America, the main priest for quite some time there, he invented all new torture techniques of how to convert people who weren't converting to the true religion. Doesn't really sound very godly. So we can see that if we actually soberly look at the tenets of religion, such as thou shalt not kill, just being a nice person all round, and having faith and service to God, this is far removed from how so many of the so-called followers of God have been propagating their religion all around the world. And I've mentioned it before, when the British came to Australia and they met the Aborigine people, it was so foreign to them to meet people who just wanted to leave the land as they found it. They didn't want to develop it for their own comfort to a great extent or anything like that. They just wanted to leave it as it is. And that was so foreign to the Britishers' conception of how we should live as people that they classified them as not even being human. And we think, oh, that was a long time ago. But you know, even up until the 60s, it was still legal in some parts of Australia to kill Aborigine people because they're uncivilized. And then when they decided, oh, maybe they are human. Okay, they're human, but they have a smaller brain than the white person. So then it's still okay. Do whatever we want with them, enslave them. And we think, oh, maybe this mentality is gone. But still, this is in the fabric of our DNA. So now it takes on the guise as materialism. And you can see it happening in India. Even though the British Raj has left, still now the Indian man thinks, oh, the white way is still better, so we should follow the white man's way. So still there's this colonial hangover that there's a certain way of seeing the world, and that's much better than so many of the traditional indigenous systems around the world who live for hundreds of thousands of years without toxifying every single part of the planet. So, and even in religions, when we're born in these certain countries, this memiplex is so strong that we bring this into our religious practice. And when we're trying to share religion, still there's a mentality, even if you are in a very loving religion and there's really good tenets to it, this memiplex possesses you, and you have this thing, oh, if someone has a different belief system to me, or someone's doing a different dance with God that I am, still my way is better. And I should try to tame the savage native and convert him to my belief system. It's a very hard thing to free oneself from. So we should be aware of these things. Because so often we're just trying to recruit people to our own worldview. And worldviews are literally self-views. This is how I see the world. And we're always trying to recruit people to our position of how we see the world, how we see reality, how we see the divine. And if you see it in another way, well, of course you're wrong, right? And I'm right. It's a big problem coming. Here's one prayer from St. Thomas of Aquinas. One may have never heard the sacred word Christ, but they may be closer to God than a priest or a nun. So sometimes people can get very puffed up on their learning, or they're in a prestigious position in some religious institution, but they can be very, very far removed from actual any kind of God consciousness. They can be wearing robes or have some powerful position, but this can just puff up people's ego, and then they start to get followers. People start to worship them because they give some nice talk, or they're born in some priestly family. Very, very far removed from actual being a humble servant of God. So, does this God fellow actually exist? Now, I actually already gave a class on this earlier, but we can just very briefly touch upon it from the point of view of logic and rationale. Because there's two kinds of theology, natural theology and revealed theology. So natural theology means essentially cause and effect. And every effect is coming from a cause. And if you keep tracing this back, if we look at it from a predominantly scientific point of view, the fundamental scientific analysis of reality is everything is made of matter. And this matter, there must be a fundamental particle, because we know there's the atom, and then from the atom now we know that there's the electron, the neutron, the nucleus. But scientists are always looking further and further and further to find what is the primary matter, what is the primary fundamental particle, that irreducible simplex that cannot be reduced or divided further, and it is not made of constituent parts. Because if it was made of constituent parts, those parts would be the fundamental particle. So it's the fundamental particle that can no longer be divided. You with me so far? Clear as mud? So, if there's this fundamental simplex, this irreducible particle that is the building block of all material creation, then this fundamental particle, how does it collect and manifest into the very intricate structures of planets, of the sun, of all the forms on Earth? There must be some intelligence acting upon it, or somehow it must have some kind of consciousness that it can collate things together in a very organized and structured way. Like this planet is in a very, very fine distance to the sun that it can sustain life as it is. It's very astonishing, actually. And how all the planets are in motion, all this is very amazing. So this fundamental, irreducible simplex, it must have the quality of being omnipotent and omnipresent. And its consciousness must also be all-pervading to organize into structure. So these characteristics of omnipotent, omnipresent, all-pervading sounds a bit like the description of maybe something you've heard before. And the other point of view is more from a quantum theory. There's not an irreducible simplex. The fundamental reality is a formless energy, a formless potential. And then at some point that formless potential, it actualizes into matter. Okay, so we've got form or formless potential. That's your two options, unless someone's got a third. Anyone wants to present a third idea? No? Okay, so we've got two. So if the fundamental reality is a formless energy, then that energy also, it must be all-conscious, all-knowing, all-pervading, omnipotent, omnipresent, to actualize form coming into manifestation and then acting upon that form to then create planets, the sun, life, nice food and goa, all these kinds of things. So either way, you can't get away from the fact there's an all-pervading, omnipotent, omnipresent, all-powerful consciousness. Sounds a bit like this God fellow, yeah? So even from a logical, rational point of view of investigation of natural theology, if you're actually humble, then you can't get away from the fact that there's an all-conscious, all-powerful being. So what's Ibn Sina, the most influential Islamic philosopher, he calls the necessary being. So if you don't want to admit this, that's fine, you can believe whatever you want to believe, but really it just shows one's fundamental irrational scientism, because scientism is a religion, because we have just investigated from a scientific methodology. But you'll find that a lot of scientists, they're actually not following the scientific narrative. They are following the religion of scientism, and they're looking, like in previous classes we looked at Prakriti, the 24 elements of material nature. And if you're looking for God only in the material elements, he won't be found there, because God is beyond these material elements. So therefore we've established there's an all-powerful, pervading God, unless there's any challenges to this. I welcome them. No? Okay, we'll carry on then. So, a lot of people, they'll take up a religious belief, and will use religion in this context of either believing in a God or not believing in a God, because science is also a religion, or being an atheist is also a belief system. Because there's a way to know God, like we've investigated how to stabilize the chitta, and in the stabilized chitta you can very easily realize God for yourself. So this is a science. So people will take up a certain belief system because it gives them some comfort, and it gives them some kind of thought structure to relate to this universe that they find themselves in. And it actually doesn't matter whether this belief system is true or not, but it gives them some comfort to adhere to something, because people are very uncomfortable in the unknown. So they want to know just enough that it can alleviate the discomfort of not knowing. So then, okay, I believe in God. My parents are Christians, so I'll say that I'm a Christian. I don't follow, I don't go to church or anything, but it's just enough of a belief to alleviate the existential anxiety of really admitting to myself, I don't know what the hell's going on or where I am actually. Or I'll just believe whatever they told me at school, that everything's atoms and somehow it all collided together and here I am and go up by an accident and life is meaningless. And I'll just believe that because that gives me enough comfort also. And I'm really just too lazy to really look into it myself. But all this time I'll be living a completely empty, shallow existence and buying so many things and then just get cancer and die. And that's most people's life. I'm sorry to say. But either way, whether you believe in God or not, because people don't think so deeply, they just have these unfinished thoughts hanging in space, and we just cling on to some unfinished thought just enough to give us comfort, and not actually investigate anything. Because what's the difference whether you believe in some conception of God in the sky or the universe is ultimately atoms, if you're not really, because God ultimately is not to be something just believed. God is something to be experienced. And we have presented the science of how you can experience God. Whether you want to follow or not, it's no problem, up to you. But belief will only take you so far. And when you're only acting upon the platform of belief, so many religious wars will come. Because I believe this version, you believe that version, and we'll just have a war, and I'll hate you and your family and thousands of descendants of generations for millions of years because you believe in this version and I believe in that version. Complete nonsense. Because people are too lazy to actually just follow a process to realize God for themselves. And we can see, and the masters of pretty much all traditions, when they actually follow the process to realize God for themselves and then they share that, what happens to these people? They get shot, crucified, hung, strung, flailed, because we want to stay in illusion actually. You know, sometimes people get upset about the world, and there's an inherent sense that something's really wrong with how we're living. We're very disconnected. The children, the teenagers, so many people can intuitively sense this. And if you're an adult and you're more mainstream, then you'll be constantly engaged in a life of distraction so you don't investigate that anymore. But I can't remember where I was going with that. So, it was somewhere pretty good. Anyway, if it comes back to me, what to do.
I have a question.
Yes, questions are always welcome.
So I've been talking with a lot of hippie people who mention speaking things into existence. So why is it helpful to speak about things that we don't like, saying these people are doing this thing?
Could you repeat the question? Sorry, because
Can you talk into this?
Oh, sure. So I'm mentioning about the idea of speaking something into existence. So if you say something, it comes. So if we're talking about like things that people are doing that we don't like, or things that we are trying to go not against, but trying to go a different path, why is it helpful to speak on those things? Basically, reinforcing that exists in this world. Is the question.
Thank you very much for the question. Really, we always want to come to the level where we can accommodate multiple views and perspectives at the same time. So if I have the conception I can speak things into existence, then I may say $1 million. I don't see it coming. But at the same time, where our awareness goes, energy flows. This is for sure. And so, yes, by being in resistance to things, you're actually feeding that thing energetically. And the modus operandi of very powerful people on this planet for a long time, they don't care whether you follow them or you oppress them. Either way, it's the same to them because you're still feeding them energy. So we should be very aware of these things. But at the same time, it's a somewhat new age philosophy that I can just speak things into existence, and then that's just going to manifest. Because you'll also see who is saying in their life, oh, I want my beloved wife to die. I want my father to die. I want my family to die. I want my car to break down. No one's talking like this, but all these things happen, yeah?
Yeah, I'm more talking about saying, well, there are people who are believing without following through. There are people who are too lazy to think about something. Is staying there too lazy to think about something not creating people who are lazy to think about things? Because now I see it that way.
I recognize your point. Whether I speak it or not, they're still lazy. And I'm also very lazy. So I'm also speaking about myself. And first of all, if you want yoga, if you want connection, yoga means connection, to unite. First of all, there's a V-yoga, a separation. So what I'm doing here in the beginning is essentially presenting a V-yoga, a separation of what is not real or what is not conducive to our ultimate benefit, so then we can come to the understanding of actually what is conducive for our ultimate benefit. And if we just focus too much on one way, have the pendulum swinging on one way all the time, this is not a mature standpoint, but you've got a very valid point about where our energy goes. We should be very mindful of this. But what I'm doing here, it's like in first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and some of the second chapter, Krishna is instructing Arjuna in what he's not, and also instructing him in what he is. So we have to, it's very useful, at least in the beginning, to distinguish between matter and spirit. And then when we can have that discernment between what is material and what is spiritual, this gives us a very good, solid foundation. Otherwise, if you try to just jump ahead to a very high level, for a level you're not qualified for, and say, oh, everything is ultimately spiritual or everything is God, then I'll just sit back on the couch and have another beer and do so many nonsense things. This is actually not helpful. So in the beginning, it's very useful to first have some discernment between what is conducive for the expansion of consciousness and what is causing the contraction of consciousness. And then when we have that awareness, when we come out of the mind and are utilizing our intelligence, then from the intelligence we can come to a higher level of being situated in the soul. So there's a sequence like that happening. We don't want to stay here for the next 2 hours just pointing the finger at everyone, saying this person's bad, and if that person's bad, then I must be so wonderful. This is not conducive, but it's helpful to exercise discernment. So we're trying to awaken some faculty of vivek, discrimination here. And then when we can have that faculty of discrimination functioning, then it's more easier for us to navigate what will lead to our expansion of consciousness and what is our thoughts, conceptions, and activities that keep us in a contracted state of consciousness. in essentially all religions around the world, we can see that certain followers in those religions, they are guilty of so much nonsense behavior. And particularly if you're a very ardent follower of a particular path, if you see someone in your congregation, in your sangha, or maybe it's your guru, they fall down or they have some incident, and you're completely invested, and because your entire identity is built around being in this group, organization, disciple, or however you package it to yourself, it can really shatter people's whole sense of reality, because I've built up an entire persona around being in this particular group, or being under guidance of this particular teacher. And then they can throw the baby out with the bathwater. They'll give up on spiritual life altogether, at least for some time. And this is a great shame, actually. And the main reason that these indiscretions happen is because mostly religions are made up of human beings, and human beings have egos, and we have so many faults. And so engaging in religion and spiritual practice, it's like being in the shower. And if you're covered in mud, you have to give it some time for it to all wash off. And one of the saints in our line, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says, with religious people, you'll see often some of the very worst behavior, which sounds quite radical statement, particularly from someone coming in a religious tradition, but also being very honest. But why will we see such sometimes terrible behavior coming from religious people? Any thoughts on that? Apart from just nutters.
Too many rules sometimes, too much repression in the
Yes,
systems.
too many rules, oppression.
And they're burning through the karmas at a much accelerated state, so it's all this happening really quickly.
They're in a process of accelerated growth.
There's often a strong group mentality, a way in that culture, in that religion, of a way they need to be, that they need to present to the world in their position, and they suppress things and aren't honest with themselves, and then at some point those things come out.
Yes, so not being honest with oneself and essentially trying to be too holy too quick. And then we all know how that works out. So, to finish Bhaktivinoda Thakur's example, if there's a very wide river, and in the center of the river there's an island, and that island's above the surface of the water, the current may be very calm around that island because it's a very wide river. And then if you try to step off that island and you're coming towards the opposite bank, towards the bank, the river may be flowing very, very swiftly, and it's very hard to cross from the river at that point. So what this represents is the island in the middle of the river. This is just your ordinary conditioned material life, going to work, coming back on Friday, going to the pub, watching television on the weekend. You're not rocking the boat too much. You're just following the weapons of mass distraction, and you're just kind of coasting along in life until you get cancer and die. But for the person who's trying to come out of the river of illusion, like Vasanti pointed to actually come out of that river of illusion, there's a deep cleansing process that has to happen from all the stored samskaras, impressions in the consciousness. And so when that deep cleansing process starts to happen, so much gunk from the heart is starting to come out. And when that starts to come out and come to the surface, particularly if you're not under the guidance of guru or in traditional Eastern system, you'd be staying in the ashram in a supportive environment for that, then that can create a lot of havoc in your life. And your psychology may not be able to deal with that. And so it's a sign of progress, but externally it looks like a tornado. So, and the general person is not doing such deep work, so this deeper levels of psychological neuroses are not coming to the surface. Yeah. Follow what I'm saying? But that is not a justification for religious nonsense, or for those on the religious path to just say, oh, it's just part of my cleansing process. Because actually, with more awakening becomes more responsibility. The more awakened you are, the more responsibility you have. You may think, oh, yeah, I'll become enlightened and everything will be easy and carefree, la 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 la. Actually, this is not the case whatsoever, because your awareness and your intelligence is becoming so refined on every single level of creation, and also this beyond to the spiritual world. You realize the far-reaching implications of your actions, and so there's far more responsibility for the very awakened person than the person who's just asleep and stuck in the rat race. So to actually be a guru, a very heavy responsibility. That's why one meaning of the word guru means heavy. It's very heavy. And so for those people who put themselves in a position of being guru, but actually are not in a steady realized state themselves, and still have so many unwanted things in the heart to come out, that's why we see so much nonsense coming, because it's a very powerful position to be in. There's a fitting poem, actually. It's called Crazy, from St. Teresa of Avila. From a distance, all enter his house. Once near, watch out for the guard dogs, both four-legged and two. Some of them are as crazy as hell. So, another aspect of why people join religion, people just want to belong to something. And actually, the mind, the ego is like, just identify with anything. Who cares what it is? Just identify with something. The ego doesn't care what you're identifying. Just identify with something, please. So you can identify, I'm an atheist, I'm a Hare Krishna, I'm a Buddhist, whatever. It's all just labels, but it gives you some identity, some sense of how to navigate this world. Or I'm a businessman, I'm a surfer, I'm a hippie. All just thought constructs in the mind with no corresponding actual existence in reality. So then we want, I want to be with other people that believe in the same thing that I do. And so birds of a feather, they flock together. And so it doesn't matter what you believe, you seek out the association of people who believe the same thing. And then you create a little club, you create a religion, you come together and you share food, do all sports people, all these kinds of things. I like this sports team, you like that sports team. We're always trying to gravitate because there's a deep longing in the soul to have connection. And in our conditioned state, we don't know how to actually seek that connection in a very sattvic and conducive way. So then we just try to seek connection through essentially the guna that is most prominent in our consciousness, the energetic state. And we'll gravitate towards that sangha, that association with whatever energetic state that our consciousness is in. And then, particularly in a religious sense, very much when our faith is weak, then because our own faith is weak, it makes us feel better when we gravitate towards people who believe the same thing, because then it validates for us, oh, I must be on the right path, because there's more people that believe the same nonsense that I do. And then I should recruit other people to believe the same nonsense, because that will make me feel even better. And the more numbers that we can get of people believing this nonsense, oh, it'll be so wonderful. I don't know if you've ever observed that. It's quite funny, actually, when you see it playing out. So...
It's a lizard?
God can come in any forms.
Just keep in mind, it's probably a lot more scared. It's a lot more scared if you.
Yeah, we'll just give him an hour.
Just leave it.
Hang out there.
Just leave it alone. I'm amazed he's on.
I think we'll have a little care time now, seeing how everyone's getting a bit excited.
Raj wants to tell us something. Indian belief. Indian belief. If you touch this type of lizard, you will get rich.
Oh, did you hear Basandi? Did you hear? If you touch a lizard, you will become rich.
It's an Indian belief that she touch this type of lizard.
So this need for connection and community is very, very strong. And it's so strong, in fact, that in the UK and America, there is atheistic churches. Because the atheists, they are seeing, oh, something's missing from our lives, and we don't believe in God. But last year I was reading one book by this guy from Australia who described himself as a agnostic Christian. He had Christian leanings, but at the end of the day he didn't know what was true. At least he's honest about it. And he was quoting some surveys done in different communities and towns around the world. And if there's a church, if there's a mosque, or if there's a temple being constructed in a sound town, city or village, then those residents of that place, when asked, do they like this idea of this religious building being constructed or not? What do you think the general opinion is? Yes or no?
Well, the answer is
No? We've got a no? Yes, got a no, got a yes. Depends. Got the whole spectrum now. No, yes, and depends. So the answer was yes. The higher percentage actually like the idea of the religious building being constructed, although most have no intention of ever going to visit it. But they like the idea of it being in the community because it gives some sense of community, some sense of upliftment. They know in a time of crisis that they can go and take shelter at that place. Maybe they're going to have a soup kitchen or feed the poor or something like that. So the general percentage, they actually are in favour of having the religious building in the community, which may seem quite strange in these atheistic times, but it gives some sense of social cohesion. So that was quite interesting. Yeah, so the atheists, they like their churches too, because they like to come together, and I don't know what they do, sing atheistic songs and share food. But so this aspect of spiritual community is very, very important for most people on their spiritual journey. And so many people will stay in a religious institution because of the community aspect. And they will even put, for so many people, the community aspect, the sense of belonging, is more important than their actual spiritual development. They're more concerned with having human connection than they are with God. They like the idea of God and everything, but for most people, they're not just going to go and live in a cave. They want to do it with other people who believe the same thing. And then, of course, if you believe the same thing, then I must be following the right path, right? So it's very interesting, these dynamics. And I've just got some statistics in front of me from 2015. In 2015, 31.2% of the world's population identified as Christians, and 24.1% identified as Muslims, 16% as unidentified religious affiliation, and then the fourth in the line was Hindus. So the reason I'm bringing this up is, as I've already alluded to, the majority of the world's people who are affiliated with religious paths are Christians and Muslims, and they have a very particular way of looking at the divine and looking at God. So because of the majority of the world's population is influenced by these conceptions, then for the general person, that will be their samskara to how to perceive God. So naturally, in those kind of perceptions, there's some great limitations, because in the Abrahamic religions, God is seen as like some kind of, it's a very human-centric, superimposed worldly vision upon the divine, as being a king, as being a creator of the universe, as being the cosmic judge, those kind of conceptions. So whether you are following in any of those paths or not, because that is the biggest majority in the world is influenced by that conception. When most people hear the word God, knowingly or unknowingly, we will be shaded by those views. So that's a very strong contributing factor of why a lot of people have aversion to religion, because it's their fallback conception is the angry cosmic judge.
Okay, to ask a question.
Sure.
If it's going to take too long to answer this, do you think, is there a relation, have you thought much about if there's a relationship between cultures that have a strong culture of colonisation and that culture's predominating like conception of God, how they see God, and why do we see that in the world, this sort of colonisation mentality so much, and is that linked to the predominating views and relationship, how these cultures see God?
If we look at it from an anthropology point of view or a historical point of view, I'm not saying this is a Vedic perspective, I'm saying from a historical or anthropology point of view. Paleolithic man and early Neolithic man, they very much had a relationship with the cosmos as saying everything is animate, everything was alive, the mountain was alive, the tree was alive, the river was alive. And this is a very different, or you can also say in the West, a kind of paganistic way of looking at the world as being full of animate beings, and the cosmos, everything was full of life. And then at some point along the timeline, there has been some links suggested as more urban cultures built, then there started to be a power structure as part of that urban culture, like governance and that kind of thing. So then previous to that, when we're living in smaller communities from this point of view, everyone was very much involved in sustaining and maintaining the tribe or the community. And generally speaking, people didn't have the luxury to be removed from life and just sit in a office or some building and have other farmers and this kind of thing support them. So when this started to take place in human society, when we moved from hunter-gatherers to more urban and farming, then you had these larger communities start to build, and then you have governance and power structures of part of those communities. And there is a bit of a correlation between the conception of God then being a very transcendent God up there in the sky, similar to what's happening here on earth, of like you've got the king or you've got the governor or the ministers and that kind of thing, and then he becomes a bit untouchable, out of reach. No longer is God just the gods in the river and the mountain and all this kind of, it starts to be getting up there and out there. And then when you've got an up there and out there God, then the churches, the temples, etc., then you've got an intermediate between them, the brahmana, the priest. And then of course you need to pay the priest or the brahmana a lot of money to be the intermediate between you and God. Very good for business. It's a very good marketing strategy actually. So I'm not saying it's true or not true, it's just an interesting point of view to consider.
Marketing created by God.
He's the ultimate marketer. Also, in this regard, those populations who have less faith and belief in God, they consume, statistically speaking, more resources and are more environmentally pollutive towards the planet. And those that have a higher faith in God, generally speaking, they use less resources per capita. However, those that use mostly Western countries that have a lower belief in God and are using more resources, they generally can take more action to rectify the environmental pollution that they are having. And those countries that have a strong belief in God, their environmental, you can see it in India. Practical example. that have. What's the question exactly?
Yeah,
Sorry.
which are the countries you are referring to as the one that has less faith in God but more power of action?
I don't have those statistics
Okay.
at my disposal of who's taking more action in terms of environmental. Everything can get a bit graded. Like in Sweden, for example, there's a very strong prominence of people. They perceive God in nature. This is in many places in the world, actually, and there's some very logical reasons for this, because Mother Nature hasn't really directly crucified anyone or tried to convert people to one holy book, or all these kinds of nonsense things that man does. And in nature, you can very easily get a sense that there's something greater. You can feel that, greater than yourself. And this is a very nice feeling, because to just be absorbed in this suffering, psychological, contracted mind-body complex state of mind, it's a real suffering condition. So if you just go out into nature, then you can, there's a correlation between meditation here, where your consciousness actually expands and you feel good, because you're not just absorbed in your little where me story, and there's something, and you feel like you're connected to something higher, and there's some kind of purpose to the universe. And because there's no religious trauma getting triggered, so a lot of people have the leanings towards nature, Mother Nature, nature spirits, and this kind of thing. So that's one reason why people are leaning towards that conception of God. And this statistic I'm looking at, the question was asked, is religion an important part of your daily life? And the top countries who said yes were Bangladesh, Nigeria, Yemen, and Indonesia. Sri Lanka, apart from Sri Lanka, so those are all Islamic countries. And those who answered the least, Estonia and Sweden.
What were the links like between religion and, so countries where people claim to have more faith, less pollution?
Not necessarily less pollution.
You said
They use less resources. Yeah. And those that have more faith, maybe they're not so good at actually cleaning up their environmental pollution, if you look at environmental statistics about things. But part of that is they don't necessarily have the wealth or the resources to deal with the byproducts of their society. And those societies that are more materialistic, they're usually more atheistic, but they have, because their energy is going in towards technology, they have the technology to rectify some things, while at the same time spraying chemicals on everything. So we'll move on from the statistics. If we consider for a moment the existential and the moral implications of believing in God or not. If we think that there is no God and life is meaningless, there's no purpose to it, what is the implication of that in our life? What is the implication of that on society? What is the implication of that for children? And we can see, as the world becomes more materialistic, as a certain paradigm of educational system comes into play more and more stronger, that is based on the world just being an accident of collision of matter, how depression rises, how obesity rises, how there's a mental health epidemic. So it's pretty obvious to see, putting aside for the moment whether God is true or not, the more atheistic we become, the more unhappy we become. There's a direct correlation between it. Not that I'm saying it's all happy roses in the Middle Ages and places like that when there was very heavy conceptions of God, but that was very much flavored from one particular narrative. So Jordan Peterson, he was asked the question, do you believe in God or not? And he said, I don't know if God exists, but I act as if God exists. Because if there is a higher power, then this universe must have a reason. There's a reason to something. There's a trajectory to where we're going. And there's themes amongst the major religions of the world, such as Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Christianity, some general themes that what we do in this life has repercussions in the future. We won't go into the nuances of that, but they have these general commonalities. So we can see that how we're living our life now will have repercussions in the future. And in a materialistic narrative, because we're so immediately absorbed in immediate sense gratification, we are poisoning the planet like never before at a crazy rate. And all our children, children's children, future generations, what kind of a planet will they be inheriting? So we can see, even just on the environmental platform, the implications of this kind of thinking. It's even in our own lifetime. Like, yeah, oh, that's what I was going to say earlier. Just come back to me. So we think that, so there's this innate sense that there's something wrong in the world, and part of that is because we think the world's very rational, we think the world's very logical, and we just can't quite make sense. Why is the world the way it is with all these problems when we're very rational, we're very reasonable beings? But you have to ask the question, when did the age of reason actually start? Has it started, or did it actually end a long time ago? Because when we have people in power and making decisions who are making decisions that toxify this planet for every living being, this is not reasonable. So when you actually look at the planet, that human beings, pretty much, we're like addicts, and an addict will do anything to get his fix, and is completely irrational and completely illogical. So we have completely irrational and illogical desires of how we engage with this world, and then we used our developed intellect to fulfill this completely irrational desire. So if you look at the world, that actually we're crazy addicts, it makes much more sense than actually thinking that we're very logical and rational beings. And you'll find that the leaders and the decision makers, they're the most irrational, addicted lunatics there is. And then you understand politics very nicely. Is it not so? So let's briefly just look at different conceptions of God. So first, there's perceiving God as being nature or being spirits, and then as our and part of this is coming as a trauma response to not wanting to investigate whether there is a supreme God, because of, justifiably, because of all the nonsense that's gone on in that being's name in the past. But yeah, we're not seeing things clearly because it's coming from an aversion. And because nature doesn't trigger that, we lean towards that side. And then, like in India, there's 33 million gods. So which one's the right God? You can just pick any one. But actually, just like there may be a global company, and that global company has one supreme boss, but in each country he has CEOs, and then below the CEO is managing director and all these kinds of things. I don't really know how business works, but something like that. And so you have a hierarchy of power and control going up to the one supreme boss, right? So these different gods, or these different devatas, they are empowered beings in charge of a particular aspect of material nature, but they are not the supreme God. And there can be a lot of confusion around this. Who is the supreme God? Is it Lakshmi? Is it Ganesh? Is it Zeus? Is it Ra? Which one is it? But we have to see what is their Vaishishta, what is their speciality. And a lot of these Devatas, they are managerial positions, and different souls, they can incarnate and take that position for a particular amount of time, and then when that karma is up, they will move on, that soul, and another person will occupy that position. So there's only one supreme God, but that one supreme God has different names. But there's a distinction between the Devatas and that supreme God. And in Sanskrit, that supreme God is known as Vishnu Tattva. And that Vishnu Tattva has different names, such as Lord Ram, Narayan, Krishna, etc. But they're not on the same level as the Devata, because the Devata is like a manager of the company, and the Vishnu Tattva is like the supreme boss. Here's a little poem from St. John of the Cross. It's very deep in relation to our journey in this world. Once I said to God, "How do you teach us?" And he replied, "If you were playing chess with someone who had infinite power, infinite knowledge, and wanted to make you a master of the game, where would all the chess pieces be at every moment? Indeed, not only where he wanted them, but where all were best for your own development. And that is every situation in life." So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that karma is so subtle, you will not be able to get your head around it. But what St. John of the Cross is pointing out here, every single situation in your life, if there's a flower growing in the garden, that flower very naturally, spontaneously grows towards the light, reaching for the sun. If you're a gardener, you know this. And if you bend a leaf, or one day you bend that flower, you'll see the next day it's growing back towards the sun. So there's an inherent trajectory in the soul to move towards the light, the love of God. And you can either work with that, or you can work against it to your peril. So God is not personally involved in arranging every situation, because he's got much better things to do than just look at you and what you're up to. But he has organized the universe in such a way that whatever is happening, it's trying to help you to move back towards that sunshine, towards God himself. And for some people, they're taking the very, very long road, and in one sense we can be in that state of aversion eternally, and we'll get more and more and more smashed by illusion. Or we can start to work conducively with the movement of our life towards that spiritual trajectory. Very deep poem St. John of the Cross is pointing out here.
What's the name of it, Sam?
St. John of the Cross.
Oh my God, could I ask, have you heard of Pascal's wager? I think you love this thing.
I've heard of it, but it's not coming to mind.
So, like, imagine like a grid, yes, no, right? One of the questions is, does God exist? One of the questions is, do I believe? If no, then they're both the same. If yes, good stuff, bad stuff.
Yeah. So that then goes into a whole lot of other things which we won't have time to get into today, like why does God create the universe? If God's good, why do bad things happen?
Like hedging your bets, you were talking logic earlier.
All these things can be reconciled to a certain degree by logic, but we unfortunately don't have time to get into them today. But all these things must be reconciled in the field of our unconsciousness, because if we have doubts, how can we come to this platform of surrender? How can we come to this platform of relationship with someone who we think, oh, maybe on one hand they're very loving, but on the other hand they're a tyrant, or they're creating something very unjust? So all these things must be resolved in the field of our own consciousness. And God's a person. How can we come into relationship with reality, with God, when our perception is God's a formless, energetic nothingness? How are you going to surrender to a nothingness? How are you going to come into, so many people, they're putting their selfies on Facebook or Instagram or whatever social media all the time, taking photos all the time. And because this propensity of seeking connection is just prevalent everywhere, it's like, oh, please see me, please see me. It's not actually you, it's just your current body that you have, but with material conditioning we think the body is the self. But that it's a way of trying to reach out and seek connection, because you can't have everyone just wants to be seen, particularly in relationship. They just want a loving partner who will but will love them through all the nonsense things that they have. And so many people, they're striving so deeply for that. And so many people, they engage in relationship just to try to fix and adjust the other person so you can be how I want you to be. But everyone just wants to meet someone, oh, they'll love me exactly as I am. And paradoxically, if you can meet someone like that, it'll be the most helpful conditions for you to actually flourish and grow. And the other end of this spectrum, if you meet someone and they're just trying to change you, this is both of you will just go downhill very fast. So God's always like that. He wants to be seen. He wants to be in loving reciprocation with you. So he's sending his saints. He's sending his teachings. Because God has everything, but he doesn't have your love. So, particularly in this tradition of bhakti, we are giving a methodology of how to come into a personal relationship with God. And when you have a personal relationship with God, it's just like you have a very, very close friend. And in a very close friendship, you reveal your heart to your friend. And so God wants to reveal everything to you. He wants to reveal his heart to you. But you have to know him on a personal level for that. He's not going to reveal his heart when you think, oh, you're just a formless energy and I don't want to do anything more to actually come in relationship with you. So if we want to know the heart of God, we have to come into relationship with the heart of God. Here's a little poem from Rumi. Very nice imagery. The grass beneath a tree is content and silent. A squirrel holds an acorn in its praying hands. Just imagine a squirrel holding a nut. I quite like this image. Offering thanks, it looks like. The nut tastes sweet. I bet the prayer spiced it up somehow. The broken shells fall on the grass, and the grass looks up and says, hey. And the squirrel looks down and says, hey. Rumi saying, I have been saying hey lately too, to God. The formalities just weren't working. So Krishna actually says in Sastra, all this relationship of trying to perceive me as the king, the ruler, this Aishwarya Gyan, what it's called in Sanskrit, Aishwarya Gyan, it doesn't please me. Because God wants to have a personal loving relationship. He doesn't want to have a relationship where you're treating him like a king and he's bowing down. This doesn't please his heart. Yes, you can interact in that way if you want to, but he wants to have a very narava, human-like relationship with you. So this is the very special thing about Krishna consciousness. Because to actually know Krishna, you have to move beyond the conception of God of Aishwarya Gyan, of just seeing him as the ruler and creator of this universe. It's extremely human-centric and it's extremely universe-centric. But actually God, on his home turf, he's not interested in this material. He just wants a loving, human-like relationship with you. So in our scriptures from our realized saints, they have seen so many things, and they are in loving communion with Krishna. And Krishna eternally is manifest in 3 ages: as a little boy, a slightly older child, and then as a fresh youth, no older than like 19 years old. So he's also known as Gopal, the butter thief. When he's just so, for a moment, just give up this conception that God's the creator of the universe and all that. That may be so, but just put that aside to the moment. And just imagine a conception of God where he has very natural human-like relationships with those who love him so much. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, as one surrenders to me, I reciprocate accordingly. So his eternal parents, Mother Yashoda and Nanda Baba, they have such a relationship with God. They want God as their child, and their love is so strong. God is controlled by their love, and he becomes their child. And so he's born from the womb just like an ordinary child, and Mother Yashoda is nursing him on her breast. And when he grows a little older, he develops a taste for butter in the cowherd village, and he is going to all the houses in the cowherd village, and he's stealing butter. And all the mothers of the neighboring houses, they become very angry at Krishna. But Krishna is also still God. He's Swayam Bhagavan, Atmaram. He is completely self-satisfied. He doesn't need any butter. What's one of the metaphors of this pastime? He is going to each house to steal the love, to taste the love of those different cowherd women. Because God he's not so interested in the external offering. Like today we're making prasadam, blessed food. He's not so interested in just eating the sabji or the rice. What he really wants to eat is the love that we put in when we're offering. You can make a very nice offering with 16 articles of worship and all these, but if there's no love, no, Krishna's not coming. And you can make a very simple, untasty offering, but if you have a lot of love, Krishna's running full power to come and take that. Just like Krishna was invited to the house of Duryodhana to have a very opulent feast, so many preparations, and to be served on golden plate with golden cutlery. But he decided not to go there, and he decided to visit his friend Vidura's house. And when he went to Vidura's house, he was not home, but his wife was home, Vidyarani. And then she said, oh, Krishna's here. And Krishna and Vidura, they have a very close friendship. And so Vidura's wife, Vidyarani, she was very overjoyed to see Krishna because they have a very loving relationship. And so she thought, oh, I should offer Krishna some food. So she went and got bananas, and in her love and excitement, she peeled the bananas, threw away the banana, and then she put the banana peel on the plate, and then she offered it to Krishna. And Krishna, because he's only coming to taste love, he was eating the banana skin. Oh, this is the best banana I've ever tasted in my life. And then just then, Vidura came back, the husband came back. And then he saw, what is my wife doing? She's throwing the bananas away and she's feeding Krishna banana peel. And he was about to say something to the wife. And Krishna said, no, 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 you just stop. Because Krishna's coming to taste the love. This is a completely different conception to the Abrahamic ruler, judge, jury, executioner who's going to banish me in hell forever if I don't do what he wants. Completely different conception. And one day, the great sage Durvasa Muni, he heard that the supreme Parabrahman, the supreme creator of all the spiritual and material worlds from whom everything emanates, ahamsa vasya parvo mathamsa avam pravadate yati macha bhajante mam parabhavasamanvitaha. Everything emanates from me, Krishna is saying in Bhagavad Gita. That supreme Parabrahma, who's not even a blade of grass is moving in this world without his will. He had taken the form of a little child performing his eternal pastimes in Vrindavan. And so he wanted to see that form of Parabrahma as a little child. So Durvasa Muni, the great sage, he went and he saw from a distance that supreme Parabrahman, Krishna, playing like a little child. And if you have a game of chess with God and he's omniscient, he's omnipotent, omnipresent, how can you even have a game of chess with him? He knows every single move 10 million years before you even thought about it. So how boring is that for you? And how boring is that for him? So this doesn't please God. He wants to have natural human-like relationship. So when Durvasa Muni, he came there, he saw that Krishna, he was playing with his friends, with his cowherd boyfriends, young boys, and they were having a wrestling match. And Krishna and Madhu Mangal, his funny Brahmana friend, they were having a wrestling match, and then they got into a debate over who won. And Krishna was like, I won. And then Madhu Mangal was like, no, I won. And then in the distance they saw Durvasa Muni, a great sage. And they thought, oh, this sage will be impartial. Let's go up and let's ask him who was the winner. And in Vedic culture, whoever's the loser has to carry the winner on their shoulders. So each one was thinking, oh, the other person will have to carry me on his shoulders. So Durvasa Muni, he sat down and he was astonished to see Parabrahma, the creator of all the worlds, playing like an ordinary child, like a little young boy, completely astonished by this. So he sat down and he was in samadhi. And the boys came up to him and they're like, oh, Baba, who won the wrestling match? And Madhu Mangal was like, it was me, right? It was me. And Krishna was like, no, it was me. Tell us, who was the winner? Who was the winner? But Durvasa Muni, he was completely in ecstasy. He couldn't even speak. And so they were pulling on his beard, they were pulling on his jata, on his dreadlock. And if you know the history of Durvasa Muni, he's a very volatile personality. He has cursed so many things, eradicated entire dynasties just by getting in a bad mood. But these little boys, they were pulling on his beard because he was so astonished to see God playing like an ordinary child. So this is just one little tiny glimpse. What's God like on his home turf? This is the Naravat. This is the loving relationship that we want to come into with Krishna. Because Krishna, he is the most attractive form of God in all of everywhere. That's literally the meaning, Krishna.
Krish is most and like Na is attractive? Or
Krish means all attractive, and Na means in existence, or Ananda. So that being who's the most attractive in all of existence, that is Krishna. It's not any name related to a sectarian group here on earth. It's the name of God that addresses him as the most attractive, wonderful form of God. Krishna. It's his original name. And Krishna also is Avatari. So, maybe you know the movie Avatar, about people who descend down into... This is actually a Sanskrit word. So Avatar means one who descends. So God has so many avatars, so many partial incarnations that descend to this world. But Krishna is Avatari, the fountainhead from which all avatars come from. Why is he Avatari? Because he's the form of God where love is most manifest. And so we have all heard the saying, God is love. Krishna is love. And so Krishna is the personification of the form of God that has the most love manifest in it. That's why he's the Avatari, the original form of God. And all other forms of God, the love is starting to go down less and less and less. Like, for example, Lord Brahma, 78%, Lord Shiva, 84%, Lord Narayan, 96%. Krishna has Venus in all 16 houses in his chart, which means he has maximum beauty. Lord Ram has 14 in his chart. So even from the point of view of astrology, Krishna and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they have maximum beauty. You can even read their chart and see for yourself. So I just read a couple of descriptions about wonderful Krishna. So this is from Krishna Chandra Astakam by Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami. Krishna's effulgent bodily complexion defeats the luster of a fresh monsoon cloud. Kajal around the eyes and blue sapphire, all mixed together. This is the complexion of Krishna. And his yellow cloth, his pitambara that he wears, is more effulgent than kumkum, the rising sun, and a flash of lightning, all mixed together. How beautiful is Krishna. And his entire form is anointed with sandalwood paste and camphor and saffron. How beautiful is the fragrance of Krishna. And on his ears he has makara shaped earrings that dance to and fro. Have you ever seen Vedic dance, Indian dance girl? But these are defeated by the swaying earrings of Krishna. How beautiful are his earrings. And his face, his beautiful radiance of his face shatters the pride of the full moon and all varieties of lotuses. And with his beauty, he tightens the shackles on the hearts of all the Braja Gopis, all the cowherd ladies in Nitya Vrindavan. Krishna is the most attractive being in all of existence. What could be more attractive than Krishna? Radharani.
But Krishna itself is Radha.
Yes. But still Radharani is more attractive.
Yeah.
Isn't attractive? Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, so who says?
Beauty is subjective, but everything's a person. We have to understand. When our vision moves beyond just the gross physical forms of the manifest vision in front of us, then you'll see everything as a person. Like in indigenous cultures, when they're seeing the river, the mountain, the tree, they're seeing a personality. That's not some imagination. This is for real. When you go deeper in meditation, it's not a belief system. This is just a byproduct of meditation. Everything is alive, and everything is a person. So there's the personified form of anger, there's the personified form of lust, and there's the personified form of beauty. There's a personified form of pleasure. And from there, their partial manifestations come down and down and down and down into this world. Just like in the philosophy of Socrates and Plato, they call this the theory of forms. That everything here is a reflection of its eternal, perfected spiritual form. And so whatever beauty, whatever devotion is manifest here, this is just like one photon emanating from the tips of the toes of Radharani. How beautiful is she? We cannot even imagine. She is the Devi Krishna Mai Prokta Radhika Paradevata Sava Lakshmi Mai. She is the origin of all Lakshmis. All goddesses of fortune emanate from her. How beautiful is Radharani? We cannot imagine.
You said the word Krishna, or
Mhm.
Krish, is most beautiful imaginable. So
Mhm.
the word most implies there is nothing beyond. How can those two things, I mean, if they're the same thing, that's fair, but it's like people saying Michael Jordan's best because it was back in my day versus now, right?
The spiritual domain is not subject to the limitations of the material logic. So it gets to a certain point where we have to throw out this thorn of logic to actually taste the unlimited rasa. If there's a green mango, it's not very tasty. And then the mango becomes yellow, then that's tasty. But it's still on the tree and along comes a bird and it picks the mango a little bit. And then when that happens in a fruit, more sugar gets sent into that fruit and it becomes more sweet, papakwa, fully ripe. So Radharani on the tree of rasa, she is like the papakwa, the fully ripe mango that even Krishna, oh, he wants to relish that taste. And astonishing.
Does that mean stuff happened to Rajarani, to like trauma that causes like things that happen to it? A bird pecking is intense for a fruit.
This is only an analogy,
All right.
because Radha and Krishna, a material analogy will never be perfect on the transcendent world, because everything here has a limitation. And the Radha Stakshiraj by Rupa Goswami. He has a nice verse here. Just as the jasmine elates the bumblebee, she gives great joy to the bumblebee of Krishna's heart. So she's like the fully blossoming flower, and Krishna's like a bumblebee, always coming to relish and taste again and again and again the ever fresh nectar of Radharani. And actually, the love that Radharani has, this is so great. The rishis, they are staying in meditation for thousands and thousands of years just to get a slight glimpse for a moment of the tips of the toes of Lord Narayana. And Krishna is so much higher than Krishna. And so how high is Krishna's position? And then Krishna, who is the master of all the material and spiritual worlds, who could be his guru? He's the guru, he's the abode of all gurus. Who could be his guru? Is it possible that Swayam Bhagavan can have a guru? The prem, the divine love of Srimati Radhika is the guru of Krishna, and it makes Krishna dance in ever new ways like a puppet. So how high is Radharani's love? We cannot imagine. And so when Krishna was here 5,000 years ago, he was so astonished at the love that Radharani had. And so when he left this world, he was thinking, oh, I want to taste what Radharani tastes. What is it like to have that love? Because it's one thing to be the honey, but the honey can't taste itself. So you have to come back as something else to taste the honey. So then, 500 years ago, Krishna has another avatar, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. What's the purpose of that avatar? To taste the honey of Srimati Radhika's love. So Krishna came 500 years ago in another avatar, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the primary reason that he came in that avatar was to taste the love that Radharani has. What is it like to love Krishna? What is it like when Radharani is the abode of that love? Even Krishna doesn't know, so he has to come in another avatar to taste the love, even though he knows everything, but still he doesn't know this love. So this is something very wonderful. And then the end of next month, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he performed his Leela, his play in Bengal, and there's one very holy place there. And there's 9 islands, 9 sacred islands that we do a pilgrimage of. So at the end of February, with our Guru, we will all be leaving Goa and we'll be going to these 9 sacred islands, and each one is like a different flavor of love. And so everyone is welcome to come and maybe just taste a little piece of that honey. What is the love that Srimati Radharani is tasting? This is if you dive. And also the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he inaugurated the chanting of this Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So the process to taste that love, you dive into this Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and then gradually, you'll surface in the ocean of the love of Radha and Krishna. This is our mission. Jai Jai Shri Radhe. Any questions? Now a little bit more kirtan and then lunch.